Hey there, deep divers. It's Julie B, and today I'm diving into the mind-bending masterpiece that is Severance Season 2, Episode 7, Chikhai Bardo. It was truly a work of art, taking us on an aesthetically gorgeous journey through the memories of both Mark and Gemma, interspersed with the explosive reveal of Gemma's horrific life on the testing floor of Lumon. And in the wake of Mark's collapse in Episode 6, he spends almost this entire episode unconscious as part of his reintegration process, and by the end, it's possible that he's been reborn as a newly reintegrated person. And most importantly, the true endgame of Lumon is finally coming into clearer focus, as is the horrifying truth about what the Cold Harbor file will actually do to Gemma. So stick around to the end for my thoughts on that. Since the episode is structured in a non-linear way, it's a challenge to piece together the sequence of events that occur and what it all means, but I'm going to parse through it and make the most important points clearer for you here. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start here. While some of the scenes in this episode are profoundly confusing and seemingly random, and while there are still many unanswered questions, the objective of Lumon all really boils down to a surprisingly simple explanation now. And it ties into my theory that I put out a few weeks ago on Lumon's endgame, which I'll build on in this video. Gemma is their prototype for a new version of human being with flattened emotions molded in the image of Kier, the embodiment of their vision for all of humanity in the future. It's a technologically more advanced form of brainwashing. This way, they can more easily shape all of humanity into children of Kier, symbolized by the faceless babies in the opening credits this season, as one baby eventually appears with Kier's face at the end. The implications of what they could do if Lumon actually achieves this goal are astronomical in terms of mass mind control and world domination. In this episode, we get the stunning reveal of how Lumon is working to achieve this goal. They're trying to desensitize Gemma to things that are unpleasant or upsetting to her as she visits various rooms. In each one, she transitions into a different severed persona who feels as if she never gets to leave, just like the innies on the severed floor. And she must go through experiences that she personally hates, experiences that range from annoying, such as writing thank you notes, to anxiety-inducing, going to the dentist, as you can clearly see from her body language here, to terrifying, being in a simulated plane crash. This is unthinkably cruel on so many levels. Cruel to Gemma's Audi, who is imprisoned down there, and cruel to every severed version of herself in each room, who is constantly suffering as if she's in hell, feeling as if she never gets to leave that room. In the dental room, she begs for a break and is told it's been 6 weeks since she's been there, but to her it feels as though she never leaves. In the Christmas room, she again begs for a break and is told that Christmas only comes around once a year, to which she replies, "It's always Christmas." When she leaves each room and turns back into her Audi, she's asked how she feels. Over time, the objective must be for her to no longer feel any ill effects anymore, no more trauma or discomfort. The man presiding over these tests is the vile Dr. Maurer, the mysterious man who picked up dental tools from O&D to bring to the testing floor in Episode 6. He seems to be infatuated with Gemma and plays a different role in each room she visits, but of course her many severed innies don't recognize him because they have different sets of memories. And in this key moment, he makes a statement to Gemma's Audi that gives us insight into Lumon's endgame of totally desensitizing human beings. He says that Kier will take Mark's pain away, just like he's taking her pain away. As we've seen on the town of Kier's license plates, Lumon's slogan in Latin is Remedium Hominibus, which translates to a cure for mankind. So they are most likely marketing their chips as an altruistic measure to rid humanity of its suffering. But just as in any cult, it's really about control. The Egans want to control the entire world's population, in my opinion. As Lumon tries to desensitize Gemma, the various rooms that she visits are symbolic of Gemma compartmentalizing her emotions. We've already seen this foreshadowed in the way the MDR team refines the numbers. They react to them with various emotions, then sort the numbers into bins at the bottom of the screen based on what those emotions are. In other words, compartmentalizing them. One of the most fascinating reveals in this episode was the introduction of the 4 doppelgangers for MDR who had appeared in episode 4. Apparently, it's their job to oversee the progress of the MDR crew, watching them through cameras implanted in MDR's computers, as each of them has one of the MDR people's faces on their screen. As Drummond and one of these overseers monitor Mark's progress on Gemma's files on a computer, we see a screen that essentially reveals that Gemma has been severed a stunning 25 times. You see, each file name here represents a different room in which she becomes a different severed innie, 24 of them in total. The 25th innie is Miss Casey, and Gemma's outie makes the total into a horrifying 26 versions of herself within her brain. How do we know this? Because we see several of the rooms on the testing floor in this episode, and they all correspond to file names on the Lumon computers, such as Wellington, Allentown, Drainsville, etc. Furthermore, Gemma mentions to Dr. Maurer that she's been to every room except one, Cold Harbor, the name of the crucial file that Mark is still refining. But more on that later. So we can safely assume that there are a total of 24 rooms that Gemma must visit, and in each one she enters as a different innie, as we see she transitions when she enters each room in this episode. We didn't get to see all 24, of course, but the show only has a limited time to get its point across to us. Now the question is, what will all of this mean for Gemma, and how does it tie into Lumon's endgame? Let's take a closer look at the clues in this episode. The title of the episode is Chikhai Bardo, which in Buddhism is the 4th state between death and rebirth. It represents the inception of the process of death, ego death specifically. Ego death is a complete loss of subjective self-identity. The 19th century philosopher and psychologist William James calls this self-surrender, and Jungian psychology calls it psychic death, referring to a fundamental transformation of the psyche. In death and rebirth mythology, ego death is a phase of self-surrender and transition, as described later by Joseph Campbell in his research on the mythology of the hero's journey. It's a recurring theme in world mythology and is also used as a metaphor in some strands of contemporary Western thinking. In the context of Severance, the introduction of this concept of Chikhai Bardo and ego death point to what I believe is likely Lumon's end goal, the complete elimination of Gemma's identity, her individuality. If Mark completes the Cold Harbor file, which corresponds to the only room Gemma has not yet visited, I predicted in my past videos that his Gemma will be gone forever, that she will be damaged beyond repair. I'm even more convinced of this theory now. If he completes that file and she starts entering that room, her outie self will eventually die and she will be reborn as a permanent innie with flattened emotions. And if Lumon succeeds with Gemma, this is exactly what they will strive to do to all of humanity. It's why Dr. Maurer tells Gemma in this episode that Mark will benefit from the world she's siring, that Kier will take away his pain as he's taken away hers. The end game would be to implant chips in the heads of all of humanity that will totally desensitize them, flatten their emotions. And it will all be based on the prototype of Gemma. So she will metaphorically be siring this new world. But the Egan's true motivation is not altruistic at all. In my opinion, it's the perfect way to turn humanity into mindless followers of Kier, a technologically more advanced form of brainwashing. There is clearly a cult of Kier going on here, with people making religious statements replacing God with Kier regularly, such as Milchick telling the MDR crew to thank Kier for their time with Irving, and others like Drummond and Dr. Maurer speaking of Kier in reverent terms. Their employee handbook is worded in biblical-sounding language, and their Kier-focused artwork looks biblical as well. Ms. Cobell sang a hymn for Kier in Season 1 and has a shrine in her house devoted to him, which also showed a picture of a young girl at a school called the Myrtle Egan School for Girls, most likely Cobell as a child. In Episode 7, Ragabi tells Mark that Cobell is a soldier for Lumon who was raised by them since she was a child. This is all the confirmation I needed to confirm my belief that Cobell has been brainwashed by the cult of Kier since childhood, and I think there are many other true believers as well, including Milchick, Drummond, Dr. Maurer, and now young Ms. Wong. But with Gemma as a prototype for this new kind of chip, Lumon will seek to brainwash the population in a much more efficient way, without the need for fighting politicians over the issue of legalizing severance or trying to convince people to take severed jobs for a better work-life balance. This has been their strategy up to this point, as we saw in Season 1 with the state senator fighting for severance, and Lumon promoting the supposed benefits of severed jobs. Social justice groups like the Whole Mind Collective have been another obstacle for Lumon, as they have staged protests against severance, which Mark encountered firsthand in Season 1 as they handed out flyers next to an outdoor statue of Kier. There have also been lawsuits. In Season 1, an innie sued the company after getting pregnant at work. And in Season 3, we saw an example of actual prejudice against severed people in society. After Dylan was fired from Lumon and interviewed for a regular job, the interviewer was appalled and discriminated against him because he's severed, refusing to consider him for the position anymore. But Lumon could surmount all of these difficulties if they can convince enough people that these chips are a way to cure humanity of their suffering. And then the cult of Kier, with the Egans in control, might actually have a chance at brainwashing a much larger swath of people, perhaps even the entire world, their endgame. This is why the license plates in town bear the motto, "A cure for mankind" in Latin. So they must already be pushing that narrative of false altruism. And they're already trying to change hearts and minds with Helena's PR stunt. Because if an Egan is willing to get severed, this will serve to normalize this procedure in society. As for Mark and Gemma, how do they factor into all of this? Well, in this episode, heartbreaking memory flashbacks reveal that Mark and Gemma met as college professors, fell in love, and experienced a devastating failure to have a child, which ultimately drove a wedge between them. When Gemma had a miscarriage, they unsuccessfully tried fertility treatments 3 times. Notably, the paperwork at the fertility clinic bore the distinctive teardrop Lumon logo on it, indicating that Lumon owns this clinic. And as they enter the waiting room in this scene, Dr. Maurer himself could be seen walking past them. So this is clearly a red flag, and it's what put Mark and Gemma on Lumon's radar as potential targets. These are the same cards that O&D was producing in Season 1, and the card Dylan stole was this, the Chikhai Bardo card. As the trauma of their infertility battle drove a wedge between them, memory flashbacks show us that Mark became increasingly insensitive to Gemma, as his coping mechanism seems to be to emotionally shut down. Ultimately, as we see in the final flashback, Gemma left to go to a party one night and never came back. The police showed up at Mark's home, and we can assume that this is when they told Mark that Gemma died in a car accident. Except we now know that Lumon paid people off to fake her death, so this must have been the night when they abducted her. Most likely, someone at the party she went to was connected to Lumon. My guess is that someone from Lumon deliberately ran Gemma off the road and abducted her from there, while Lumon paid off the coroner to substitute someone else's burned body for Gemma's. A car accident probably did happen, unless Gemma was catching a ride from someone else. Also, in a dizzying sequence within this episode on the testing floor, there are a series of split-second flashes on the screen, subliminal images of a dark, snowy road, trees, and a quick glimpse of Mark standing at the tree where he thought Gemma had died, which is actually from a scene in Season 1 when he went to that location. There are also split-second flashes of Mark sculpting a tree out of clay, which he also did in Season 1, when Miss Casey asked him to sculpt the way that he was feeling, which proved at the time that some feelings can bleed through from the outie to the innie. I think that these subliminal flashes on screen from the scene of a car accident are meant to suggest that this actually did happen. It just wasn't fatal. There are notable shots of spinning trees as well, which could have been part of Gemma's first-hand memory of being in that accident. And once Lumon had abducted Gemma, they had a golden opportunity to recruit Mark. They exploited his grief and his desperation to escape from the pain of his loss. And there's a specific reason why they needed Mark. Multiple times this season, Lumon people have emphasized the importance of Mark finishing the Cold Harbor file, implying that only he can do it, and saying that it is going to be the greatest achievement in the history of this planet. Drummond, Cobell, Natalie and Milchick have all emphasized the importance of this file at different points. They've caved to all of Mark's demands in order to make sure he completes that file, even after the MDR coup and his other acts of insubordination. Far from firing him, they actually gave him a 20% raise. And once again, they mention Cold Harbor in this episode, saying Mark's stuck at 96% due to his nosebleed. So why can only Mark complete the file Cold Harbor? In past videos, I theorized that only Mark can do it because even though any Mark doesn't remember Gemma, on a subconscious level, he still has a deep emotional attachment to her. Now I think it runs even deeper than that. It's also tied to his subconscious memories of their time together, all the things he knows about her, her likes and dislikes, the things she finds unpleasant, and her biggest fears. In one flashback from episode 7, Mark mentions that Gemma hates writing thank you notes, and that's exactly what she has to do in the Allentown room, where she's celebrating Christmas non-stop. Incidentally, in season 1, we learned that Mark won a special award for his successful completion of the Allentown file, a crystal figure of his head. I think that Gemma can only start entering a room once the corresponding file has been fully refined, and Cold Harbor isn't finished, so that's why it's the only room she hasn't been in yet. Of course, any Mark doesn't consciously remember anything about Gemma, but Lumon must have figured out that his buried outie memories of her enabled him to be the only one who could help them successfully complete the refinement of Gemma's chip. Perhaps other members of MDR were of some help in refining her data, but no one was as efficient at this task as Mark, so they realized how much they need him. And what awaits Gemma behind the ominous Cold Harbor door? A member of the Severance fan community, Matt Gilbert, offered a fascinating theory, and I agree with part of it. He theorized that Cold Harbor is where Lumon will drown Gemma to death. Now, in episode 7, the nurse asks Gemma what she'd be more afraid of, suffocation or drowning, and she said drowning. There have been frequent references to water throughout this series, from the Lumon water tower to the water droplet logo to Dylan's fascination with the idea of scuba diving. In the new Lumon training video this season, Helly was shown bobbing for pineapples in a vat of water. And in episode 4, Irving nearly drowned Helena at Woe's Hollow. All of this could be foreshadowing the plan for Gemma, subjecting her to partial drowning in the Cold Harbor room over and over again. Even the name Cold Harbor sounds like a body of water. All of the rooms have corresponded to things that Gemma would rate at varying levels of unpleasantness and discomfort, so it would make sense if Cold Harbor is the one they're saving for last. The ultimate torture, the last step in totally desensitizing her. In my opinion, I don't think they will actually drown her to death, though. I think they may subject her innie to constantly being partially drowned over and over again, like Irving was doing to Helena, except Gemma won't experience a quick rescue like Helena did. While they'll let her leave in between visits to the room, she won't feel as if she's left at all, with her innie feeling trapped in that horrific situation non-stop. I believe that the end game of this tactic is her ego death, the death of her outie persona. If Mark successfully completes the Cold Harbor file and Gemma is subjected to this torture, I believe her outie self will die along with all of her outie memories and identity. But she will live on as a forever altered, mindless drone without any ability to feel deep emotions. And it would be on point with the religious subtext of the cult of Kyr, too, as if she's been baptized in the sacred water of Kyr. When Gemma asks Dr. Maurer what will happen once she's been in all the rooms, he gives her a deceptive answer, saying, "You will see the world again, and the world will see you." But I think he means that a forever altered version of her will see the world, not with her present outie identity. And also, when she says she wants to go home, he tells her that Mark has remarried and has a daughter. I just think he's lying to her because he's infatuated with her himself. I don't think he knows if Helena is pregnant with Mark's child or not, and it doesn't mean they'll get married anyway, even if she is. As of now, Gemma seems to be still relatively normal. She hasn't lost her outie self, even though she seemed so robotic as Ms. Casey. She does stare into space often, but that's certainly a trauma response. a way for her mind to escape her prison through memories. One sign that Gemma is still Gemma as of now, she scoffs at the bizarre cult-like manner in which Dr. Maurer speaks to her, sounding like a normal human being even after she's been to 23 of the 24 rooms and held prisoner there for years. So she's still herself for the time being. But I think the Cold Harbor room will ultimately result in the loss of that identity, her ego death and rebirth as a kind of Frankensteinian creation of Lumon, ready to be put on display to the world as an example of the way Lumon can rid humanity of its suffering, an attempt to dupe the masses into signing up for this procedure. And as for Mark, well, by the end of episode 7, he finally wakes up, and I predict that he will be reborn as a reintegrated version of himself. So in effect, it will be as if he has experienced an ego death of his own. When he wakes up and Devon asks him where he went, he doesn't respond, but the sunlight shining on his face could be symbolic of the enlightenment that reintegration has brought him. Now he might stand a chance at stopping Lumon from completing its goal, but ultimately it might be too little too late for Gemma. Also, we see in this episode that escape attempts for her on her own are futile. She hits Dr. Maurer over the head and makes it up the elevator to the export hall, but that immediately switches her to the Ms. Casey Inney, who is sent back by Milchick, so she won't be able to escape without help. I don't foresee a happy ending for Gemma, but maybe there's a ray of hope in this. Looking back, it was brilliantly foreshadowed that Gemma has been severed many times. As my co-host Scarlett pointed out, in Season 1, Mark tore up a photo of Gemma into many pieces, then taped it back together, while Billie Holiday's I'll Be Seeing You played in the background. Since this was foreshadowing the reveal that Gemma was severed many times over, perhaps it's also foreshadowing that she could be put back together into a whole person again. Season 2, Episode 7 brilliantly brought back the song I'll Be Seeing You in a scene in which Gemma tells Dr. Maurer that she wants to go home. So maybe, just maybe, the show is hinting that a happy ending for Gemma could still be possible. Now I want to know what you think. What do you think the Cold Harbor room will have in store for Gemma? What do you think Lumon's endgame to all of this is? Do you think Mark will now be reintegrated, and could he stand a chance at saving Gemma? Let me know all your thoughts and theories down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and check out my Severance lives on Monday nights at 10:30 p.m. Eastern for the rest of Season 2. And until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.